demands it. This is from Steve Wilkins' book, Face to Face, which if you'd like to purchase a copy, there's the school has a bunch for sale. If you want to wait until you go through the prospective members class, you can get one for free. But if you want to start reading now, you have to purchase it. So, friendship and hospitality are vital for life simply and fundamentally because God is a triune being. He is not a solitary monad, example Allah, but Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. John reminds us that God is love, not that God loves, but that love is fundamental to God's very being. And this can only be true because God is triune. As a triune being, God has always existed in communion of love, joy, and fellowship. The Father has eternally loved the Son and given himself for him. The Son has always loved the Father and given up himself for him. And the Spirit has always been the bond of love between between the Father and the Son, and ever lives to exalt both. The nature of God, this idea of loving fellowship, of a bonded fellowship, is where we get the necessity to have friends and to show hospitality. But we live in a broken world where sin has destroyed and damaged everything, particularly relationships. Sin has cut to the core people so that they have difficulty establishing friendships, establishing hospitality. Think back to the Garden of Eden. What were Adam's first words about Eve? What's that? Hubba bubba? Hubba hubba? What were his first words about his wife? Anybody know? Yeah, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Right? Their intimate relationship. This is, we are close. What were Adam's second words about his wife? This woman that you gave me this fruit to eat. Sin damaged these relationships. It broke it at its core. And so we have to fight against this sin. We must overcome the broken relationships. We want to declare to those hurting in a world full of sin and loneliness that God is a God of relationship, and we're to model our lives after him. So come, let me be your friend. Come to my house for dinner. James Jordan says that that evangelism ought to take place in this way. That our society, the greatest sin that we need to overcome is this sin of broken relationships, and loneliness is this manifestation in society. We should be declaring the goodness of God in relationship by being friends with people, by bringing them into your home, by sharing your life with them. So, let's talk about friendship for a second. How many of you, I don't put you on the spot. You should have a close friend or two. You should have a close friend or two. You can't be close friends with everybody. You would wear yourself out, wouldn't you? But you should have a close friend or two. You should seek that relationship out. You should seek out a relationship like Jonathan and David, or you should seek out a relationship like Paul and Timothy. You should have people who are in your life that are close to you, that you can share your life with, and we'll talk more about that here in just a second. But you should be friendly toward everybody. You should be friendly toward everybody. And oftentimes, friendliness is a precursor to actual friendship. The church often speaks with more than one voice. You should speak with more than one voice. You should go to, it's not a requirement that you make friends with the city council as an entity. You don't make friends with government. You should be speaking in a voice of, we need justice here. However, The councilman might need a friend, right? The mayor might need a friend. So you should be friendly toward individuals, but not necessarily toward institutions. So let me give you a definition of friendship and why you should only have maybe one or two of those in your life. The obligatory relationship where we walk together toward the same goal of Christ-likeness, bearing one another's burdens in love, admonishing and encouraging one another. Bearing one another's burdens in love and admonishing and encouraging one another. If you tried to do that with all 375, 400 people that are here on Sunday mornings, you would be devastated in your life. You couldn't do it. It's impossible. You should remember that when you're seeking a friend, when you're seeking someone to have this close relationship with, the people that you're seeking it with may already be full, right? They may already be full with their friendships. So go to the next person, go to somebody else, and then be that friend to them. Be the one that initiates this idea of bearing burdens with somebody else. If you need help with that, come talk to your pastors. Maybe we could help point you in the right direction. Friendliness, to be friendless, to be without that type of relationship, to be without somebody who is close to you, is to live in despair. It is to live in despair. And believe me, there are people in this church who have no friends, have nobody close to them. They have acquaintances, they don't have companionship in their life. The preacher in Ecclesiastes said, "Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them." On the side of their oppressors, there was power. There was no one to comfort them, he says. This is something more than a casual acquaintance. You need somebody to relieve you of the suffering that oppressors cause. If you're going to bear one another's burdens, if you're going to stand with someone when their life is falling apart, if you're going to comfort people in their sin and stand by them when the consequences of that sin find them out, you're going to need to be close to one another. Friendship in this definition is not something you spread widely. Again, you can only have a couple of these in your life. Our culture, the Western culture, particularly in America, we seek out isolation. We seek out isolation. And again, to be alone invites disaster. I can't remember who I was talking to, or maybe it was one of the speakers we've had recently that was talking about the idea of being kicked out of the city in ancient, in Greek culture and Roman culture. To be kicked out of your community was the same as a death penalty. Did anybody else hear that this weekend or this past week? Maybe it was just me. Maybe I'm listening to something. To be kicked out of your society is the same as the death penalty. That's what excommunication is, right? Excommunication is the church's answer, the equivalent of the death penalty. To be cut off, to be alone, is disastrous for somebody. But we seek that out in our culture. The USA Today, a while back, I can't remember where I saw this quote, that said, consumers are staying home more and more, watching movies delivered via cable, satellite, internet, or disc, eating in, transforming their apartments into houses into a shelter from the daily social storm. He says, I think we were looking for protection. We have purposefully sought out isolation in order to keep ourselves safe. The irony is that in an effort to keep yourself safe, we have put ourselves in danger. Isolation is the ultimate consequence of sin. And we're embracing it as the ultimate good. Any thoughts about that? Have you noticed that in our culture?
It was greatly magnified during COVID.
Very good, yeah.
Everybody was forced to stay home.
Yeah, and the consequences of that were
Yeah.
remarkable.
Suicide.
Yes, yeah. Especially among young people who didn't have outlets for meeting people. Yes, sir.
I know this is obvious, but it bears repeating that what the social media does. It gives that sense of connectivity, but it's actually not.
Right, very good. So he said the social media these days actually reinforces this idea of isolation, though it promises connection to other people. So who do we seek friendship with? Who do you seek friendship with? Christians, yeah. What's that? Somebody with a pickup truck, a pool or a boat would be nice. Those of you with pools and boats, I appreciate you. We're to make friends with those who fear Yahweh. And we're to be that kind of friend. We are to be the kind of friend that fears Yahweh. Psalm 119:63, I am a companion, this idea of close walking relationship, a regular walking relationship with somebody else. I am a companion to all who fear you and to keep your precepts. We're not to be companions, a word that connotates being united or knit together with those who do not fear Yahweh, who do not fear the Lord. It's a closeness that entails intimacy. Again, Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. To become joined to fools is dangerous. Young people should listen to this very carefully. Evil company is bad for you, but it looks so good. Right? Have you ever watched television? Anybody? Evil company looks beautiful. It looks engaging. It looks enjoyable. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, at the end of this section on the resurrection, bad company ruins good morals. Bad company ruins good morals. Wake up from your drunken stupor, as is right, and do not go on sinning, for some have no knowledge of God. I say this to your shame. Right? You are to seek out friends who fear Yahweh. The ones who will, when you are sinning, will come to you and say, you should stop what you're doing. I love you. Don't continue down this path. Stop your drinking. You're getting drunk. That's a bad thing. The relationship you have with this young woman, this young man, inappropriate. Stop what you're doing. You got to have that kind of close relationship. You got to be in relationship with somebody who fears Yahweh. Any thoughts about that? Yes.
I think in this disposable society, we treat friends like they're disposable too. And so often, right, if someone says something we don't like, or even at church, we'll just get a new one.
Right. Oh, yeah. And usually that's because you probably don't have a very close relationship with that person anyway. Right? Any other thoughts? So what's required? Steve Wilkins in his book says, true friendship requires work. True friendship requires work. A true friend grows in wisdom, bringing you along with them. Right? Your friends who will pray for you, those who will carry your burdens with you, those who will walk in love with you, they will bring you to wisdom. They will bring you along in wisdom. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. Walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Ephesians 5, verses 1 and 2. That's how you're supposed to walk. You're supposed to be imitators of God, and the people that you're close with ought to be imitators of God as well. A true friend loves God's word and his company. Good friends are found together in worship. Full of his word, we are companions to those who fear Yahweh and keep his precepts. An enemy of your sin, that's what a friend should be. They should be an enemy of your sin. They should be not afraid because you don't want to, not be afraid to lose a relationship just because you're confronting somebody in their sin. Since they know you, since your girlfriend knows you so well, since your best friend knows you so well, they can tell when you're going down a wrong path. They can call you back from destruction. They can snatch you back from the edge before you fall completely. They don't allow you to continue in that sin. Again, friendliness precedes friendship oftentimes. You can be friendly to 400 people, right? You can be friendly. You can have them, and we'll talk about hospitality in a second. You can have them over for dinner. You can greet them at church. You can talk to them. You can ask about their day. You can bring them a meal. Friendliness often precedes true friendship. Who was it? I think it was Lewis who said friendship is when you look at somebody else and you at the things that they like, the hobbies that they have, and you say, "Oh, you too? You like that too?" That's where it begins. Friendliness begets friendship. So how does that friendliness work its way out? We're to be charitable with those who have needs. If you see somebody in need, somebody who's lacking clothing, who's lacking food, then you should provide for them clothing and you should provide for them food if you're able, if you have that ability. Charitable to those who have needs. We're to be giving of our time, talent, and treasure to those who are suffering. And then we're to live lawfully with other people. We're not to steal from them. What are some common ways in being in a casual relationship, not a companionship type thing, but casually? What are some common ways you might steal from somebody? Without even really thinking about it. Yes. Borrow something and not return it. That's unlawful. That's not friendly. Steal their time by talking unnecessarily about yourself. Very good. What else? What's that? Oh, being friends with them for their boat. I'll have to think about that one. Yes, sir.
Borrow something from someone and return it in worse condition.
Oh, very good. Yeah, borrowing something from someone and returning it in worse condition than what you received it in. Borrowing somebody's car and not returning it to them with full gas tank. Right? Very good. So that's friendship. Hospitality. We are required to relieve suffering. And part of that suffering is loneliness, isolation in the world. We're supposed to relieve that suffering. Bringing those who are far away from you close to you. Hospitality. Seeing strangers in your midst, those whom you don't know. In fact, that's what the word means. It means showing love to strangers. Bringing people close to you who are far away from you and welcome them into your life. some practical aspects of our friendship and hospitality. Be intentional in opening up your lives to those who are around you. Again, this takes work. Opening up your home takes work. It takes work just in the practical, everyday things, getting all the dishes done, getting the clothes off your couch. It takes work. It just does. But that's okay. We're commanded to work. 6 days, do all your work. Then we'll take the love of Christ to them as its own end. Oftentimes we want to show hospitality because we want an invitation to a party, or we want to go to the nice house. It was your son this week, right? Said this house is. Do you mind if I say that? I mean, you put it out on social media, so I make it okay. Was it the chat, or was it a chat? Was it? Is it okay? Is it okay? Okay, sorry. Said this house is lovely or big? This house is big. Visiting somebody else. Our house is small, Dad. And you want an invitation to the big house, so you invite somebody to your house. But hospitality ought to be its own end. Its own end is relieving the suffering of others, the isolation of others, helping others. It ought not to be so that you can gain something from somebody else, which is why you should really show hospitality to people who can't give you anything back. You look at the way strangers were treated in the Old Covenant in particular when they came through town. There was nothing, you weren't going to get anything back from them by giving them your food. They were passing through, right? They were passing through. So take that love of Christ to them as its own end. It's not even necessarily an evangelism exercise, although that opportunity might present itself to them. Let Christ win them. Let them know why you're doing what you're doing, right? I love you because Christ loved me. Therefore, come and eat this food. And then let Christ win them. Hospitality is central to a Christian's life. Through this exercise, the body of Christ meets the needs of other people, starting with the church and then going out into the world. Starting with the church, going to your neighbor who does not go to church, who is truly alone and isolated. Starting here and then going outward, almost like in concentric circles. Is it easier for you to show, to relieve the suffering of a stranger you've never met? Is it easier for you to hit money on a Give, Send, Go link than it is to welcome somebody into your home who's a little crude, a little crass, who might tell your children an inappropriate story? Yeah, it's much easier to hit the link and send some money to somebody than it is to open up your home. But we are to be those kind of people. We're supposed to be opening up our homes. Romans chapter 12. Listen to this and tell me if you think these are requirements that Paul is giving. He starts off in Romans chapter 12 by saying, I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. Right? And then he goes through and explains what that's going to look like. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Required? Yeah. Love one another with brotherly affection. Yeah. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Be fervent in spirit. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Those all sound like we should do those things, right? It's what he's commanding us to do. And then verse 13 of 12, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Those last two things, meet the needs of the saints, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality, carry the same weight as Do not be slothful in zeal. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Those two things are commanded by God in the same way, meeting the needs of the saints, and then showing hospitality in the same way that those others are as well. They're essential to Christian life. So seek to show hospitality. Seek to show hospitality. And this should be a joyful pursuit. You ought not to wake up in the morning and go, oh man, I got to show hospitality again this week. It ought to be a joyful opportunity. 1 Peter chapter 4, and we'll probably close with this. Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves in the same way of thinking. For whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. For the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you, but they will give account to him who's ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is why the gospel was preached, even to those who were dead, that though judged in the flesh the way people are, they might live in the spirit the way God does. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received the gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. As God has given to you the opportunity to show hospitality, you should exercise that. Show hospitality to one another, and you should do so without grumbling. You should do so without grumbling. That kind of love covers a multitude of sins. He puts that first. He says love covers a multitude of sins, including the people that you don't want to have over for dinner. Show them hospitality. And listen, if you're living in this community, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for you to cover up somebody else's sin. Plenty of opportunity. I can almost guarantee it. This command is not reserved for the super spiritual. This command to be hospitable. Don't hide yourself in the crowd. Open up your home, your life, and yourself to others. And then translate that into the love of strangers, hospitality towards strangers as well. Elders are to be given to hospitality in particular. If you desire to be an elder, you should be hospitable. You should be hospitable. They're supposed to be showing the congregation what that looks like. Pastor Brito does a great job of that, by the way. He does a great job. Any thoughts? Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am.
It's commanded, but it's also a huge blessing.
Oh, it is, yes. It's commanded, but it is a huge blessing. That's very good. Yes. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference between hospitality for unbelievers and hospitality?
Is there a difference between hospitality for believing people and for unbelievers? I don't know. Is there? Anybody?
I would encourage having believing friends in the same group as maybe unbelievers.
Yeah.
You kind of gang up on
Yeah.
a lot of
Yes. I think there is. I think there is a difference because your purpose is, again, to relieve suffering. And the suffering is probably an unbeliever for somebody who's a believer. Their suffering is... What happened to my phone? No, that's happening. Their suffering is rooted in their lack of Christ. right? Their suffering is rooted in their lack of Christ. So it's going to look different, I think, for the unbeliever than it is for them. You probably don't have to tell somebody who's coming from church as much about the reason you're doing what you're doing, right? You don't have to go through the gospel plan of salvation when you have somebody from church over. You have to do that with an unbelieving neighbor. But again, the end is to give them a meal. That's the end of itself, is to give them that meal. Any other thoughts? That's true. And the end result of showing hospitality and friendliness towards somebody inside the church is you may become close friends with them. You're not going to become close friends with the unbeliever unless they turn their life over to Christ. Yes, sir?
What's the difference between generosity and hospitality?
Ooh, what's the difference between generosity and hospitality? Oh, that's a good question. I think generosity would probably be giving of yourself without the time involvement necessary for hospitality. The generosity could be giving somebody some money for food without opening up your home, which is good. Giving of your time in a smaller way probably would be generous. Being generous. That's a good question. Oh, bringing them in. Oh, that's good too. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Did you hear what he said? That's your dad. He's really smart. Very good. Yeah, generosity is a form of hospitality, but hospitality is not. Is that right? Other way around? Hospitality is a form of generosity, but generosity is not necessarily a form of hospitality. All right. Well, thank you all very much. That concludes our series. Yes. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah, that is part of it, yes. Let them know why you're doing what you're doing. Right? Have you all read Rosaria Butterfield's book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key? Really good book. Bad for your self-esteem. But the opening up of your home to people, and they will know. And if you are hospitable and living out your life, God willing, they will notice something different about you than compared to their other neighbors, and you'll have opportunity to tell them about it. I had well, I don't have time for that story. All right. Thank you all.